What's up, my Kaiser pups and Cinesluts, and welcome to the final episode, the 7th episode of this review, and we're going to dive in, show off my gear real quick. Decided to go full Joe Exotic and wear the brightest shirt I possibly can. It's a pink Hawaiian shirt, even though my computer is shit and can't really tell. So, and then also a animal liberation is human liberation, to really stir the pot as an animal advocate, and then on the side, as promised, drinking a little whiskey for you guys, a little Craig Alecky. It's a Speyside whiskey, a little fruity, a little floral, Get myself really in the mood to get angry and talk about everything in the 7th episode. So cheers, and let's start. So the episode starts out with Joe is now officially in jail. The whole 7th episode obviously goes over his whole trial and everything, but they start off strong. They start off hard with a quote that I think is just so ironic, predominant. I don't know what it's very splitting in a sense. Joe is quoting. It's quoted. I'm in a cage. You know why animals die in a cage? Because their soul dies, which I think is so hard to wrap your mind around. This man that keeps all these animals and he keeps them in cages and everything like that, and keeps them within a boundary. But then once he gets put in that position, he thinks it's a totally role reversal for him, thinking this is the most the most cruel thing that could possibly happen to a person, put into a pen, put into a cage, you're watched constantly, and you have no freedom. So I think it's so jarring to see that he has this mindset, but yet he's been doing it for years and decades at this point to these animals. But then as soon as it's turned around on him, he has this whole switch mentality of everything. I just think it's a great quote, I think, that they put in there. I mean, granted, he didn't, I don't know, it's not like it was scripted or anything like that. I just think it was very organic with how he is saying it, and it's just wild to think that, obviously, I guess people's minds can change out in this, but just seeing him saying it's wild. So after they do that, they push into what's going on now, and Jeff Lowe, the guy that's technically is the owner of the GW Zoo. So he right now is trying to get rid of the GW Zoo and move down to the place right outside of Texas. He's pushing for the zoo to be open as soon as possible because he wants to be making money, because that's all he cares about is money. And he recruits Tim Stark, and Tim Stark was one of the other wildlife guys that had. You normally see him holding the monkey and everything like that. He joins him as a partner because he realized he needed someone else to kind of help get this up and running, have someone else's knowledge into making everything. So Tim's biggest thing is Jeff only has a few tigers at this point, a few lions, so Tim's bringing more money and more animals, even though Jeff prides himself on having all this money and everything like that, and you sooner realize he really doesn't. And then the producers asked Tim, like, are you worried about this, or should anybody be worried about the fallout from Joe's case at this point? And he goes, I have nothing to worry about, I wasn't involved. Everyone is involved to a point throughout this show, no matter how much or how little you are. At some point you're connected back to Joe Exotic. The animal world is very tiny, it's very small. Everyone knows each other to a point. Everyone, you can see Joe could have been barely a pinpoint on the map and someone would have known what his zoo is about, because someone would have mentioned it down the line, someone would have known it. I think everyone at this point, everyone throughout the show should have been worried, but everyone they're interviewing is acting like they have no ties, no connections. They're willing to sell everyone under the boat. But at some point you have to look at yourself and see, what was my involvement with Joe, and how did I influence him, not only him, but the lives of the animals that we were supposed to be taking care of? How did I either negatively or positively affect them? And most of the times, I think if they're going to look at themselves, they can't say they positively did anything great for these animals. And later down the episode, it kind of reveals itself of how people really see themselves and how they see how the animals were actually treated, which in this episode, I do give it to them. I mean, it took them forever, besides the first 2 episodes, to really delve back into the animal perspective of everything, but I'm glad they did, even while they're entertaining every other issue that's going on with Joe and Jeff and Carol and everyone. So then they cut to Joe and Dylan talking. Dylan is his newest husband that Joe has, and it's just weird to see that Dylan is willing to stick with Joe through all of this. Granted, you love someone, you might be blinded by everything that's going on, but you have all of his ex-husbands, his ex-co-workers, all this media around him, and all this potential stuff that he could be doing. Why would you want to stick yourself around with him? Why would you want to pull yourself in further with Joe? Granted, I get you want to be there for him, because obviously Joe has no one at this point, but I think being that young and that in that position. I think at this point, this shows you could have a clean break from this and kind of move on with your life. But I'm not a relationship counselor or anything like that. But I think it's wild that he's willing to stick around with someone when you have all this allegations and all this drama going on around him. It's not something I'd want to be around. So now they lead into saying a lot of leading into. But the feds are let into Joe's house, which is on the property at the GW Zoo, through Jeff, because Jeff is willing to give up anything he has on Joe just to make himself look a little bit better throughout this entire situation. Again, even though Jeff doesn't think he has any ties to it, even though you are the owner of the zoo where everything went down. So this is another big moment, I think, even though they waited to the end. Obviously, they want to keep people to the end of the series and keep watching and everything. I keep moving this camera. But the news media picks up and they show a bunch of things. Joe has, I don't know how much of a surprise it is. I think it's just it is a little surprising, a little shocking to see that they actually found everything. They find the bones of 5 dead tigers, and from what they're describing, they find skulls, and they have bullet holes in them. But to the point of who actually killed these animals, I don't think there's no actual hard evidence. They just know there's 5 dead tigers on there. And then they go back to Joe, and Joe's trying to kind of justify euthanizing these animals because they were sick and everything like that. But again, no one knows for sure if these animals were actually sick or Joe was just having a bad day and decided to take it out on these animals, even though he constantly reiterates in the first episode, this is where I think they should have thrown back to Joe quoting himself. He's like, I'd rather shoot a person before I shoot one of these tigers. Again, were these animals actually sick? How does he actually know? No one has any medical background on these animals. No one has any real research on knowing whether these animals are sick or they're just having a bad day and they might not be doing as well as they normally do. It's just wild that Joe's trying to justify himself. Granted, he's trying to back himself up and make it seem like he was doing the right thing, which again, in his head, no matter what, he's always pushing for the right thing. And then they cut to Doc talking about... and Doc really hits the nail on the head, I think, at this point about it. The feds are only trying to dig up all these animal issues just so they can get this murder plot to stick. Because the murder plot's very flimsy. There's no real connection between him and Alan or anything like that. They pull out all these animal things, and they're just trying to put it as a billboard pretty much for people to back up their ideas on Joe and why Joe is a terrible person. But they're not really delving into, they're just like, alright, this happened, so we can stick it to him, and then we can use that as leverage to kind of, really what we want to do is only get him for the murder plot, but we might as well tack on these other charges, even though they're not as a big deal. As you can see, they mention it a million times about why they're putting him away for so long, but they're only really pushing for the murder plot that didn't really occur. And again, was this even Joe's idea, or was this again a whole plot set up by someone else to kind of frame him? If we move a little further on, I delve more into the whole thing a little later. And then it's crazy, they go further in and showing Jeff throughout this entire last episode. You kind of see him backtracking on a lot of different things to kind of make it again seem like this is all Joe. There's no way I'm involved. There's no rhyme or reason as to why I would be connected to Joe in any sort of way, even though you're his partner and you're the owner of the zoo. No matter, just because you think you broke ties with someone, you still have a connection at that point. So Jeff constantly states throughout this episode, this zoo really isn't mine. It's Joe's. I just have my name on it at this point to own it. So he's trying to shut down the zoo, and then he uses he brings the media in to show all of his cubs and everything like that to sell his ideas of this new zoo to kind of wipe the image of Joe. No matter what you do, again, you're not removing yourself from Joe. Joe built that zoo, and you decided to take it over and stick around and stay there. You knew what you were getting into, and you're not going to escape it by building a brand new shiny Zootopia of everything that you have there. You're still going to be connected to Joe. There's no way you're getting out of it. So I forgot to mention a little bit earlier in the episode, they have Jeff and Tim buying the zoo, but then they also kind of want to bring in James, the undercover informant, and the Chucky-looking doll that everyone talks about, with a terrible haircut. So this starts off another debate between Jeff and James. Again, Jeff is just trying to bury everything he possibly can and make himself so discorded from everyone else that I think he's trying to make it look like, well, why would I have any connection to anything that's going on? Stop looking at me, look at them, even though I have a quite a few felonies, and I've had a lot of criminal stuff going on underneath me, even though I shouldn't have. But I'm still around, and I'm not going to get in any trouble for some reason. So the big thing between them, the reason they split, even though James again mentions that if it wasn't for him, Jeff would kind of be put back under to where Joe's level is, and kind of being investigated a little bit more, which I agree to him at that point. Because James is the one that brought Jeff in to kind of help out with the correspondence with everything. Jeff's not having it, obviously, because his name, it's his zoo, he wants it on there, even though James is funding him some money. James can't afford the enough of the partnership that he wants on there, so Jeff is just going to, at this point, he's just going to split from him again, bury as much as he can, just so he doesn't have to deal with it. There's a bunch of quotes throughout this that I think, again, it's just so polarizing to see how quick these people move on each other and how quick their ideals switch from everything. And James, again, I don't like this guy at all, but he says a great quote, everybody wants to be the biggest, but no one wants to be the nicest. Now, take it as you will. I think more so is saying everyone wants to be the biggest, being the most powerful in their respective fields or whatever it is, and no one cares about who they hurt and everything like that. But I think it goes along with the animals too. Everyone wants the biggest zoo, the shiniest zoo, the biggest interactions and things people can do to it, because it's going to bring in the most money, obviously. The closer that anyone can get to a wild animal for certain prices, the idea of it's just going to sell like wildfire. But I think it's also the idea of people want the biggest things and biggest things that are happening, but they don't care about how nice they can be to these animals and what the nicest situation is for all these animals. Again, either way you take it, it works very well for either the business aspect or the animal aspect of everything. Which again, I do like it. I do like a lot of the different quotes that I pulled from this. I do really, again, it's just very polarizing to see these people from the beginning to the ending of the episodes. Again, that's what the whole series is supposed to be about, to a point. Let's see. And then right before the trial begins, they do something else that they talk about. Jeff states, because I think James actually has some kind of recording or something like that on it. Jeff had stated that he used Alan. He asked Alan to kill Carol, or he asked him in some sort of way to be involved for the murder for hire plot, and Joe really wasn't involved. But again, they're going to try to pin Joe to it, but then they cut to Alan saying Joe asked him to hire him. So again, you have these two different opposing fields going against each other constantly, but I personally think more so it was Jeff and Alan trying to set Joe up just so they could get out of that, buy up the zoo, move away so they don't have any dealings with them. Again, Alan and Joe hated each other. There was no reason for them to come together at any point. Jeff just wanted to put it in everyone's mind that it would be Joe because it's the easiest cop-out. I mean, again, do I think if someone approached Joe and be like, I'll go and kill her, yes, I think he would go for it. But I don't think he would purposely seek out and go and ask Alan, again, someone that he doesn't trust, someone that he has no real ties to besides with Jeff. And then the trial itself begins. So now Joe is officially, he's been in jail, but now they're beginning the trial, so bringing in everyone to kind of witness, besides a few people. Two of the main people, I don't know why they didn't bring in John Reinke, the guy with the amputated legs, and Staff, which I misquoted myself earlier. I said the woman that got her arm bit off, it's a transgendered man that actually got his arm bit off, and they don't interview the two of those guys at all, and I think those two were the two. John was the manager of the zoo. They never interviewed him. You think they bring him in to kind of question the dealings of it, because John was kind of there the entire time. There wasn't a time that John wasn't there or wasn't alongside Joe, even if he was in the background. And with Staff, with the whole incident that was going on there, and then he again was one of the main keepers that were there, and you think they'd want to interview the both of them to kind of see how these animals were actually being treated and how the actual zoo was being run. But the FBI and the government kind of just push them alongside. They bring in, I guess, people that, even though they both are willing to talk, I don't understand why they don't bring him in. So John talks about, he's like, my main goal was throughout the entire zoo was to get Joe out of trouble, and I don't think I can get him out of this one, which is, which is upsetting. I think he has one person on his side, and I think that's why the FBI didn't bring him in. They don't want anyone there to help back him up, even though I don't know how the court system works with all that. So they're bringing in everyone to testify, and the big thing that everyone talks about, you either come in as Team Joe or Team Government. If you're coming in as Team Joe, you're not on the winning side, and I think that's why a lot of people decide to switch. Again, they're trying to cover their own asses to make sure that they don't get drug on there with either the murder for hire plot or any of the animal abuse cases that are against him now. And again, I mentioned it before, the strategy of just using the government, again, is abusing the idea of animals and everything like this, and just to have a murder for hire plot stick, even though, again, it's so flimsy, it's so out there, it's not ridiculous, but it's so scattered that they can't bring all the pieces together. They have to bring in, all right, everyone, they mentioned this, everyone backs up against animal abuse, so there's no way that this won't happen with a jury. Everyone loves animals, and everyone's going to be willing to do this. It's just ridiculous that they don't really care about those things, even though they can use it more to stick him in there longer. They don't care that he's going to be in there for that. They only want the murder plot in there just so they can say they're right and they're doing the right thing. And we got another criminal off the street for murder, even though, again, no one got murdered. Nothing really got put into play with all this, and there's no real connection between all that. Let's see. And then they bring in... They start showing the true nature of everyone. They bring in Eric. He was the longer blonde-haired guy. I think he's kind of high and drunk towards the end of the interviews. He comes in and he says he vividly knows he saw Joe killing these tigers and everything like that. Again, is this true? Is this just him trying to cover his own ass? I don't really know. And then Carol Baskin, of course, that bitch, Carol Baskin enters the trial. She obviously takes the witness stand because she's going to be in there very fervent against Joe, and no matter what, she's going to say as much as she possibly can against him, even though I think she probably could have taken him to court several times before for any time that he had threatened to kill her and everything like that. The biggest thing is... she says, oh, I'm surprised Joe didn't want to kill me myself, blah, blah, blah. And she's using this as like a big joke and a big media ploy for herself, I think, at this point, because she's trying to be a martyr. Because she literally says, the whole silver lining of this, even if I were to get killed, it'd push the movement forward. If I were to die, everyone would be willing to back up the big cats and everything like that. No one is questioning how people perceive big cats and exotic animals in general. People view them, either they love them for the conservation purpose or they love them for themselves. They want them and own them. Carol thinks, again, she thinks she's the pinnacle conservationist and advocate for animals and everything like that, but nothing she has done in her lifetime does anything for these animals. Yes, again, she possibly has saved some of them, but saving them to a point of, again, your rescue is putting animals in tinier enclosures just to have people come and gawk at them. You're not doing anything for the rights of them. You're not, just because you're going to the governments and the big wigs. No one takes this woman seriously, which again, it kind of sucks, because I guess she in her head she thinks she's doing something right, but she doesn't put herself on a platform enough to make it seem like she is a responsible person, or she's actually a knowledgeable person on what she's doing. Again, she just thinks that she is the pinnacle tiger woman. She is the tiger queen, if you do, at this point, and Joe is the devil, even though she's doing just as bad as he is, but again, she wants to be the martyr of all of this. So then, let's see, John comes in. John, his ex-husband, the guy with the weird teeth and the dumb tattoos, his big thing is, he doesn't want to go. He's willing to testify, even though he was so involved with Joe, to make sure he doesn't get tied into it, because he's not sure what the government is willing to slap him with. But again, as you can tell, if Jeff isn't in jail, if James isn't in jail, and Alan isn't in jail, granted, I said in the beginning everyone should be worried, but then you realize, why should anyone be worried? They're only going after one figurehead, and that's Joe. And again, I don't understand why they're only focusing just on him. Again, he's so he's so out there and he's so predominant that he seems like the biggest issue. But I think it's not the underlings, but the people working behind the scenes are the biggest issue, because they were the ones putting everything in his head and kind of pushing him further and further into what he was doing. They were feeding into him. They already know he had some kind of psychosis against wanting to go after Carol and everything and they realized he was losing his sight on the animals, but instead they're just like, let's just keep pushing him until the edge, so then we don't have to deal with him at all. Johnson disease. Let's see. Alright, some of my notes are kind of all over the place again, because this episode again bounces back and forth with everything. I don't understand what I said there. He also mentions that no one's there. Again, no one's there for Joe. Which again, it kind of shows how he had the cult mentality. Like I always said, he had people there for the cult, and I think once all of this came out, they realized how badly trapped they were, and I guess understandably so, no one's going to be there for Joe. I don't think anyone should really back him to a point, but I think more so he should have someone there to kind of help prove him wrong for the murder for hire plot. I'm not saying he shouldn't be in jail for all the animals cruelty that he had. 100% he should be put in there for that, but that should be the main point. It shouldn't just be this thin veil of the animal abuse, but they're really only there for the murder for hire plot. James comes to trial, which I think could help Joe's case later down the line, but I don't know how much it actually is. He testifies against Jeff, actually. He says that Jeff set up this entire plan, which I think, again, it's fully true, because if you look at all like the documents and everything like that, Jeff is pulling up all these bike paths, the bike path that Carol's on, the one that they're supposed to go hit. And he talks about in detail how laid out Jeff had done all this. Again, James doesn't seem the most trustworthy guy. He seems he's kind of all over the place, but I mean, he's the only one so far that could kind of help Joe's case throughout this. And even himself, and most of the media is also confusing to kind of see some of them talking. The one woman that's on there that they kind of highlight for some of the media posts is that, why isn't Jeff being investigated? The man with so many felons is now ahead of a zoo and ahead of one of the biggest, apparently, animal abuse and cub selling places that there are on there. But again, they only care about one little detail that Joe was possibly doing, and they don't care about the underlying issue of animal cruelty and animal abuse, which is ridiculous. And then again, the weirdest scene of this entire series is when they interview Alan. Like, one of the final things they interview with Alan is Alan just sitting in his bathtub. Like, what at any point where they're like, all right, this will make... I mean, again, reality TV, weird and sex sells pretty much, and they went for the weird aspect of everything. What were they thinking? Like, this is going to be a credible source, or maybe they're trying to lean more so to the point of showing how crazy Alan is and how you can't really trust anything this man is saying, so why would they use anything against Joe from Alan? Let's see, the biggest thing is also, again, the government is willing to just let Alan go. They don't really interview him. They kind of just take whatever Jeff said about Alan to be true, and they just go, alright, this was the man that was supposedly supposed to go down there and kill this woman, and he took money from him, but we're only going to focus on the man giving him money. We're not going to talk about the guy that is actually going to pull through with the actual illegal act of killing someone. Let's just gloss over that. He wants Joe to stay in jail, and I think the only reason he wants Joe to stay in jail is because I think he realizes, like, if Joe gets out, he's going to have more resources to get Alan and Jeff in jail, which is a smart move on his point to kind of push that Joe stays there, but again, it's ridiculous that he isn't being investigated. There's literal phone recordings about Alan lying about not doing anything that he said he did. He talked about, I never said I was going down to Florida or whatever like that, but Joe even states up on the stand that Alan has lied about the Florida story, and in the recordings it shows that he's even too, and the FBI has this all for the investigation, but instead they're like, alright, push that aside. Excuse me. Let's worry about Joe. Joe. Like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get why Joe is such the pinpoint in all of this. So Joe takes his own defense at this point, which his attorneys advise against, because obviously Joe is so frantic and so frazzle-brained, and so anything could happen at a drop of a hat with him. They obviously don't want him saying anything that could incriminate him more. He shows, I think, throughout the entire time, he displays more of his discord between Alan and himself, showing why would I be willing to put my trust in someone that I don't even know, or wouldn't even be willing to have him do normal jobs around my zoo, but now I'm going to go to this guy and ask him to kill a woman that I hate. Why wouldn't, one, Joe just do it himself, or two, find one of the husbands that he's with, or one of his employees that he trusts more to kind of go and do it. Joe brings up a lot of issues with the case. He brings up a lot of like holes that could be pinpointed that are like, why would I go here if I could go here? Pretty much all, obviously everything any defense should do, they should show the other side of everything. And Jeff even kind of says that he directs Joe to go ask Alan. So again, that's leading someone into doing something again, which is another issue in itself. You have people out in the world, cases where and it's a little morbid, but there's cases where people get arrested and put in jail for convincing people to kill themselves or kill other people, and Jeff is doing this directly, and there's recordings of it. But again, they just want the person that possibly put through all this and had so many threats against Carol, even though everyone on that property hated Carol just as much as Joe did. And then they cut back to Doc. Doc believes Joe was set up as well. Doc constantly says, well, Joe's too stupid to do anything. Why would he even follow through with this, even though he hates the woman so much? Which, again, I don't think he's too wrong in that. I don't think Joe was the smartest person, but I think he was smart enough not to kind of have all this, any paper trail or anything like this to kind of lead him back to Carol. I think if he was going to do it, he would just go and do it. And then Doc even brings up the biggest thing, again, about all this, about how all this stuff is getting poured into this, and he goes into the detail of the cost of everything, which I think is a little weird. Doc's like, well, $3,000 for a professional hitman, and that wouldn't even cost $30,000. I don't even, probably $300,000. It's a little weird that he has, it seems like, intimate detail about how much a hitman would cost. So his whole story again is a little wonky. And again, Jeff admits throughout the episode again that he encourages Joe, which again is enough to get you put in anywhere. That should be enough to be like, I'm encouraging someone to kill someone else. That should be some kind of, that should be attempted murder at that point for him, because he's attempting to get someone else to kill someone. Again, it's ridiculous that Jeff isn't getting investigated, even though later in the episode they said everyone's getting get it looked at. But how much? Jeff is still operating. Jeff is still doing everything. Joe, it shows how convoluted his mind is. Joe's like, wow, that went well. I got up on the stand and I think everyone's going to listen to me. Joe, no one's there for you. Everyone sees you as this big abuser and cub seller and cub handler and just all-around terrible person. Even though they may think everyone else is terrible, you just put yourself more with a target on your back stepping up there to do any of this. He thinks he's going to go home. He thinks he's going to start over. Everything's going to be fun. He's done with the animal world. There's going to be no differences once he gets out. He's thinking everything's in the past. I'm going to be fine. There's no way that I'm not going to do this. I think Joe had a point up until the jury started showing all of Joe's videos. They kind of show all the threats he had against Carol, all the things that he possibly could have done to Carol, and the prosecutor herself, she kind of wraps it up, and I think this is the big mindset that's going on in Joe, and it kind of really paints a picture that she quoted that he believed Joe was the Tiger King. Again, back to Rick Kirkman, that piece of shit, putting all of this in his head and really making this just a reality show and not a documentary on how animal abuse really is a huge issue in this country. He believes that his kingdom is under attack and he needed to take control, and he was going to protect that kingdom at all costs, no matter what had to be done. If it meant killing someone, he was going to do it just to make sure these animals had their way of life, even though Joe really only wanted to protect his life. There was nothing about Joe protecting his kingdom to protect the animals. It was protecting his right to own an animal, not the rights of the animal, which is the biggest issue with this show. It doesn't show anything about the rights of any single species besides human beings, except us. It's about our right to own and control everything around us. It's not about how these animals should be treated, and what's the proper way to treat them and how they should be conserved, which it's the biggest issue with this documentary, and it hurts me that again, it's great reality, it's great, it got people somewhat talking about it, but it's not enough. So they show him the videos, again, and the prosecutor the entire time is really just peppering in these ideas of animal abuse and why Joe has gotten, he shot these 5 tigers, blah, 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 how terrible of him, but let's talk about this murder for hire plot, blah, 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 blah. Like, again, it's just peppering in these ideas of animal abuse. It's not really addressing them at all, which is it's a major, major issue with this. James says, and then later, right before Joe is kind of ultimately ruled guilty, James kind of says, well, I feel guilty for all this. Like, I feel like I'm hurting Joe in some sort of way. Well, you are, because you helped set up Joe. Even if you don't really think you did, you kind of aligned yourself with Jeff and Alan, meaning you were on their side the entire time. You saw all this going down, but you said nothing about it. You never really let Joe in on the idea. You just kind of said, all right, I'm going to be an informant. I'm going to set him up, blah, 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 blah. But you didn't do anything to stop it. You allowed it to happen. Don't act like you're, again, another martyr in this whole situation. And again, I talk about John, the guy with the amputated legs. He's so confused as to why no one wanted him to testify. I think, again, the FBI was worried that he would reveal too much about everyone else, even though they're only focused on Joe. They would want him only talking about Joe, but I think John would have gone further into any other person that was on there, and it would have opened up a whole other can of worms, and it would have been a bigger issue for the FBI to try to control that one little aspect of everything, and they just wanted Joe at this point, and it seems like that's all they want. So Joe is guilty on all accounts. I think he has like 22 accounts of animal abuse, and then he has the murder for hire plot, so it only took the jury 3 hours to kind of conclude their guilty or verdict, and I think after those videos, after Joe taking the stand, there was no way he was coming out of here not guilty. Maybe not for the murder for hire plot, but again, the FBI and the prosecutor were pushing that so much, and then backing it up with the animal abuse. Again, I think mainly the jury was going to go for the animal abuse, but if they already had that, there was no way they weren't going to say not guilty on the murder for hire plot, because why not keep a man that's abusing animals away as much as possible? So Joe's completely broken. I mean, he's been broken a few times throughout this season, but this is rock bottom. This is it. I think he understands fully his actions and everything like that, and it's kind of terrible that it took him all the way to get to prison to kind of realize his mindset and where he was and what got him to this point. He said, and he even they quote him. He goes, "This is worse than an animal could ever be treated." But you're in the same you're in the same line as what you were doing to the animals themselves. You're in a crammed area, in a cage, not allowed out. There's no freedom. You're in the same aspect. You should have put your head in that before thinking this is worse than anything that you could imagine, because those animals would have had a better life at that point. And then they cut to the most disgusting part, I think, of this entire thing is Howard and Carol celebrating a champagne. They call it Champagne and Brie evening. They were so confident in the verdict. They thought within the first 15 minutes everything would be there. It's disgusting to think these people are that excited about all this, even though they are just as fault with how these animals and how animals are being portrayed and treated throughout this, because they're not doing anything better. Yes, they're not allowed in cub handling or cub petting, but you're not doing anything for the conservation of these animals besides putting yourself on a pedestal and saying that I do so much for all these animals, even though you can't really prove anything that you're actually doing besides owning some big cats in your backyard rescue. It's disgusting. That's all I have to say about it. I mean, I have more, but I could go on hours and hours and hours about her. And then I don't know why they put this in, but I think they just do it to kind of make Jeff look even more like a lowlife, which he is. I don't think anyone's questioning that, but they're expecting a baby, and he tells his wife that or girlfriend or whatever it is, that she has to get into the gym, and he's ready for a nanny, and it's just this whole relationship is mind blowing. And that, like, granted, they're very open to other women and everything like that coming into the relationship, but the fact that that Jeff is willing to bring in a young woman just so he can look at a nanny, and because he doesn't think his wife is attractive. It's just, again, they're just trying to show that Jeff is even more of a lowlife than he actually is, which, whatever. So Jeff Lowe, he's a very arrogant, proud person, I guess you could say. That he knows he thinks everyone has his proof, and he goes, go ahead and show it. Show your proof as to where I had any stay in this, where are my cards in this game? Why am I, obviously I have nothing in here if no one's coming to investigate him. Why would you antagonize the government and all these animal advocates out there? Even if you don't think you have anything going on, someone's going to find something at this point to do it. Why go further into it with everything? I don't understand why you antagonize him. So James kind of talks, even though, again, it's ironic. James is saying, well, Jeff's right behind Joe. There's no way that he isn't. But if Jeff is right behind him, you're right behind Jeff. There's no way you're not going to get pulled into all this as well. James still thinks that somehow he has a bigger role in all this, that he's going to do anything. But again, you were part of the zoo. You gave the money for the pizza shop. You were connected with Jeff. Jeff was connected with Joe. All of it is just a domino effect. Eventually, I think everyone's going to kind of get brought in. It's just going to take longer for whatever reason, even though you have this large case against everyone. Let's see. Who talks to the feds? So Joe, finally, I think he reaches breaking point. He goes, all right, what do I need to do now to kind of absolve everything that I've done? And I think maybe he thinks this is kind of wipe his conscience clean of what he's done to these animals in the past. He's ready to speak out. He says he has 37 names of people, which I'm assuming is including like Jeff, Alan, Doc, Carol, obviously a bunch of people, maybe even Tim as well. He is willing to work with PETA, even though they were such very confident enemies against each other. Joe is willing to give over as much as he possibly can, just to kind of make himself look better, even though at this point there's no getting out of what you're already in. Yes, you're going to drag more people down with you, but you're not making your situation any better than what's going on. He reveals a lot about wildlife trafficking and abuse and everything like that, and then they cut to the producers kind of going into Joe's storage container, which has all the different documents about the animals and the cubs that he was selling, and they're looking over it, and the producer goes, oh, this one's from Jeff to Doc, and Dylan covers that up right away, which I think is a little weird. I guess they're trying to build as much of a case against them without Doc knowing about it, but obviously everyone knows Doc is a sleazeball. He's not any better than Joe. He's doing more just on a grandiose scheme of everything. It looks prettier and shinier than what Joe's zoo was. And again, they cut to Doc. They talk about how Joe reveals a little bit because he wants revenge, which I think is fair at this point that he's so hard targeted against and no one else is. He wants revenge on it. And it seems like also he talks about Doc putting animals in gas chambers and cremates them, and he has detailed things about it. So Joe definitely has a case against all these people, but how credible is he going to be if he steps back up in front of a jury, because he's already in there for all this animal abuse and the murder for hire. So one of Jeff's quotes towards the end, he goes, everyone starts out well, then ends bad. I think to a point he's right. Everyone starts out meaning they want to do well for these animals. They want to do everything they can. But really, it doesn't take long for that switch to happen from caring about animals to, oh, I can make all this money off these animals, which again is another big issue, that these animals are all for profit. It's not for caring or anything like that. Which again, it's just certain quotes that I pulled out against this. I think very, very polarizing as to what this documentary really should have been about, but they really didn't feel like covering because they wanted more of the reality aspect of all of it. They cut to Carol and Howard thinking they're fighting a war. They're doing everything they possibly can because they are the main front of all of this. They're going to push for conservation as hard as they possibly can, but they're not doing anything. Again, they're not doing anything for these animals. They're not going over to these countries. They're not funding any money anywhere. They're going in front of the government to show their face and their rescue, to make it seem like they're doing something more than they actually are. again, I think they're just as disgusting people as everyone else on this show. They're not any better, and I think they did that well for the show. I think they went the right route with showing that even people that are portraying themselves as conservationists and everything like that, they're not really. You have to look under the veil of what they're doing and actually do your research into who they are and what their mission statement actually is, instead of just what you think they're doing. Don't take everything at face value. Do your own research, take your own stand on it, but really make sure what you're supporting is truly right. They cut to Saf, and I think the end of this episode, the end of this episode is so upsetting to watch, because they could have done this throughout the entire series and really drove home the point of animal advocacy, but they didn't. Again, the reality aspect of it, it's going to sell, it's going to get more people watching, because Joe is just so entertaining to watch, even though, again, I keep saying it, he's a disgusting individual. He goes, everyone thinks they are animal advocates, from the people who have their own 2 tigers in their backyards, all the way up to people that are operating at Carol's spot that aren't actually doing anything. Everyone thinks they're doing advocacy for these animals just to make themselves feel right for what they're doing. Everyone needs a reason to justify why they own these animals and why they need this power with everything, just to make themselves feel good. But no one in this entire series is actually caring about how the animals actually are. No, and he even says, no, not one animal benefited from this. Nothing is being changed. I mean, I'm not saying nothing's being changed, but none of these animals at this point, there's nothing being increased for their livelihood and what they've gone through. Nothing. This was a war that was fought against 2 people that wanted so much fame and so much glory, but in the end, both of them came crumbling down and made them both look absolutely horrid. No one here is exempt from looking terrible. No one. Literally no one on this show. It's just so, it's again jarring. I say jarring and polarizing, because at the end of this last episode is just so wild to see how deep these people got with everything and how they lost their vision for all this. Just one thing, I think John getting his tattooed of Joe Exotic covered up with literally just the bull, but he doesn't cover anything around it. I don't know if there was more to it, but I think it's the most ridiculous looking tattoo to have on there. Granted, I can't speak too much on it, but like it's just wild to think that this man has just a bull, and then the words Joe and Exotic are still enveloped in there, and he's not going to remember Joe just because he has that covered up. It was just dumb. And then, even though, again, I hate this guy because he's just so arrogant, Josh is the campaign manager that Joe has. He has a lot of quotes, I think, that really hit home, and I don't know if he's just doing it to make himself look better or whatever, but he goes, this was supposed to be a good and noble fight. This was supposed, and what he means by that, I think, is this was supposed to be a fight for these animals. This was supposed to make these animals have a better life, but everything is about these 2 now famous people that shouldn't be any more famous than what they were. They were just 2 people that were operating in 2 different worlds, even though they think they were in the same world. They both were doing two somewhat different things, but they decide to intertwine themselves because they have such arrogance against each other, because they both think they're right. Again, not about the animals, just about the money. So much of this money, and he says this money could have been spent for conservation and protection, and that should have been, again, the main header of this video about this series. And I think Alex had mentioned it before. They turned it into basically making it a murderer series. They didn't care about what was going on behind the scenes or anything. You don't see the animals pretty much, besides the beginning and the ending of the episode, to kind of just show, the tigers and the lions and everything are still here, but we're not going to really cover the situation. We're just going to kind of pepper it in to kind of bring your emotions throughout this entire thing, it's the easiest way to bring out everyone's emotions, because everyone cares about the animals. But again, millions and millions of dollars were spent making this episode, going against trial, going against each other about everything. Could you imagine the everything that could be dumped into this conservation efforts and put into people that could actually make a difference? Someone that could actually care for these animals and put them back in a spot where this population of these wild animals could actually thrive, and the protection could actually be there for them, so we could see them in the wild and see what the raw natural beauty is for these animals and why everyone loves them so much. But instead, it was more so he said, she said, who can make each other look like a bigger ass. And it's ridiculous that that's how they focused on this, and it's disappointing that's why this documentary focused on it this much. And here comes to the saddest part, I think, of the entire series. And again, I'm going to say it again, jarring and polarizing as to who Joe was when he was younger. They show the younger videos of him, and he has like some kind of I don't know what you would consider. It's almost like an environmental police officer outfit on, and he goes on about how dangerous these animals are and how beautiful they are, and animals don't belong in the States or where they are. They belong in Africa and Asia, and he wanted all this breeding to stop, and he wanted everything to kind of end. But then, where did he go wrong? How did this go wrong so quickly? I get money and fame really changes someone, but he could have used that money and fame to kind of really make a platform for advocacy of these wild animals, and he could have been really somebody. He could have been someone that could have been really put himself out there and really put all this money and everything and help protect these animals and really rescue a species that is just going to be done by the time before the end of our lifetime, which is it's so upsetting to see that he so quickly moved from a true animal advocate to wanting to be the most famous person out there that owned tigers. The Tiger King. He could have been the Tiger King of the animal world. He could have really been a proponent for these animals, but he decided fame and money was more important than animal advocacy, which is it's upsetting. It truly is, and to see that a lot of people go down this path just because they think they have the power over these animals, even though they belong where they belong, and there's no reason to uproot where they are. It's just wild to see how he does it. And then the very end of them showing all that, Rick Kirkman says he had to film what was going on. And again, you all know that I think Rick is one of the worst peoples on this show. He says he had to film with it, and he lives with the guild. He had to show everything, but he didn't show anything but a reality show. And he says it throughout the entire series that no matter what, he wanted to film to show. He's not showing. Yes, he might catch clips of what Joe's doing here and there and everything of different animal abuse, but did he come to the forefront of doing anything? No, he didn't. He allowed it to happen. He wanted his money, and that's how he was going to get out of this. He wants to, again, make himself seem like a martyr of everything that's going on. And then they cut to Joe's chimps, how he kept them away from each other for 10 years, and then he sold them. He gave them away to a sanctuary, and they got together, and these two chimps were... I think they were chimps. They were two chimps together, and how much they loved each other. And they ask him all these questions. They ask him, "Oh, do you think these animals were happy?" And he goes, "Who the hell knows?" But that's the thing. You know they're happy if they're out in their natural habitat. There's no question about that. Everyone looks at it's not a question. You look at an animal in a cage, and I think one of the first things most people think is like, oh, this is awesome to look, but this sucks that they're in such a small environment and everything. You should have known that these animals weren't happy. He saw how close the connection was between these animals. It'd be the same way that he's feeling now. You're in a cage in a prison. Are you happy? No, you know that right away. Your freedoms are stripped. Your life is gone. It's put away to a small cage, and that's it. That's all you have. You should know the way you were treating these animals. He even willingly admits that he deprived these animals of what their natural instincts were and what their worth was. He knew he put himself above this, and he put his fame and fortune above all of this. And just the fact that he perpetuated that he was an animal advocate, even though he mentions and says that he knew he lost his way. But he continued. He just constantly continued with everything, and it's just wild and depressing to see that he was willing to continue and put these animals' lives and their mental states in this cage this entire time, even though he knew what he was doing it was wrong, but he decided to stick with it just because he wanted the money, he wanted the fame. I just don't understand how someone can continue with that. It's just, and why people would continually back him to make him seem like he is greater than he actually is. So at the end, this is the end of it. This is it. They roll the credits. Joe is sentenced to 22 years. They roll across the credits saying the Big Cat Safety Act was passed. It wasn't passed. And Doc at this point is being investigated, even though Doc is still running what he's doing. I did a little bit of research because I saw a little bit of like Instagram posts and everything like that. He's still operating at a full level. People are still backing what he's doing. There's no real issues with anything. He's still doing what he's doing. Carol's still doing what she's doing. There's no changes with anything. There's no changes with what roadside zoos are doing, no changes with what Carol is doing. There's no more, even though they're saying there's more investigation or anything like that, there's still these people operating with everything that they're doing, but there's nothing being done. I don't get, after this documentary there's going to be, what the hell's that? How did my light turn off? I'm going to go check on it. I'll be right back. Figure out the light.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Unfortunately, Patrick has been misplaced, and he won't be able to continue these episodes. But I hope you learned a lot about what we're doing for tigers in this country, and maybe a little about the meat grinding industry. So, I'll take this too.
Thank you, Victoria. That was a beautiful rendition of That Bitch Carol.
That bitch Carol.
That bitch Carol. So I told you there was going to be someone that eventually came in, but I really want to thank literally everyone that's watched this and put any type of input with all this. Granted, some of it I went off the rails with all of it, and I don't think I covered everything as fully as I could, but animal advocacy, environment, and conservation obviously are going to be everything I'm going to back up for the rest of my life, even though if I may not follow it perfectly or portray everything perfectly. It's something that I always want to have a platform on, and I really appreciate everyone kind of coming to me and asking me different things on it, even challenging me on different things, Andrew. But I'm hoping this documentary, these reviews and everything, and anything in the future, you guys are kind of going to talk about a little bit more and kind of keep in the back of your mind with everything. I really do appreciate being able to do this, and I hope to do it a little bit more. If there's anything further down the line that you want me to do, I'm all for it, and I really enjoyed doing this. And again, this was wonderful. Thank you again for all this. That's all I can say, even though, it may seem ridiculous that it's just videos, but it really means a lot that you guys all care enough about to kind of watch these videos and kind of ask questions and question everything that's going on in the environment and conservation efforts. I L-word all you guys. Cheers to the final episode of this. Maybe there'll be more down the line, but thank you again.